Good morning. Thank you, praise team. I Surrender, Hillsong, my favorite song. You know it now. I want to hear it more often. And it was beautifully done. It moved my heart. Thank you, praise team. And choir and the youth, oh my, how beautiful that was. Ringing the bells and singing, the adults with the children. That as well moved me. It is a truly precious morning. I'd like to thank you, congregation, for this opportunity to bring the message. It was 14 years ago since I last have done it here. And when I did it the last time, and as well doing it this time, it brings me great joy. It deepens my faith. I'm glad I don't do it every Sunday. It takes time and research and Bible reading and prayer to create a sermon. And it's all good components of a healthy Christian lifestyle. And this, I have the same thought as last time, is that we all should be doing this. Not just me, but you too. Everyone should take a turn. I'd also like to thank the Monday night Bible study group. I've been working on this sermon for about a month, and I was struggling. And we had our Bible study on Monday night, and I came away with that saying, you know, this resonates with me, this passage of 2 Galations, more than 1 Peter that I've been struggling with for 3 weeks. And so I changed everything. You may find some of what we did on the Monday night in this sermon this morning. I am a little nervous, or at least I was. I lack seminary education. I'm worried I won't be as good as Pastor Laura. But then I realized one thing. I don't have to be as good as Pastor Laura. It's not a competition. So I'd like to start this morning with a prayer. And we did something at the ABC Region's annual gathering this year. And it touched me. And I'm going to bring it to the prayer. And it means you're going to have to participate. At least I'm going to ask you to. I'm going to pray. It's only 2 sentences. But I want you to take one of your hands. I want you to reach up. Everybody. Let us pray. God, we reach for you this morning. We reach for you in our prayers. We reach for you in our songs and in the music this morning. May your name be lifted high. As words are spoken and heard here this morning, may you be in our hearts to guide us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. That wasn't so hard, was it? The title of the sermon this morning is The Road Ahead. And by our, I mean First Baptist Church in Midland, Michigan. But everything here is also equally applicable to any person walking in their walk in life. And by the road ahead, I mean the manner in which we as a church or we as a person can embrace the future. A manner in which everyone believes in themselves and their relationship with God, that each of us has a relationship with God, and that relationship is personal and unique to each one of us. By the road ahead, I mean a manner in which, despite our differences, everyone is valued and respected. Exactly what Pastor Laura was preaching in the children's story. When there are differences of opinion, that they be honored and respected, and that diversity in that opinion makes us stronger. I've heard it said that negative talk leads to more negative talk, and that positive talk leads to more positive talk. So by the road ahead, I mean that we take pride and talk positively about the many great ministries that our church has. Ministries that are inward focused, like funeral meals, caring for the sick, the prayer chain, life groups, and just getting together for fellowship and play and meals, and many others. To ministries that are outward focused, like the backpack program, the first day of school breakfast, the block party, Halloween Hallway, and Take Note. Wonderful ministries. And there are many more. Our ministry in Ghana, for one, at the Baptist Vocational Training Center. We have a strong ministry foundation. We should talk positively about it. So by the road ahead, I also mean that we continue to discern through prayer what God would have us do further in our ministry, building on the strong foundation that we already have. The Bible passage that I would like to use this morning is the same one that our group read on Monday. It is Galations 2, and it's found on page 945 in the Pew Bibles. Galatians 2, verses 1 to 10. I'm going to read the passage. Then after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas, taking Titus along with me. I went up in response to a revelation. Then I laid before them, though only in a private meeting with the acknowledged leaders, the gospel that I proclaim among the Gentiles, in order to make sure that I was not running, or had not run, in vain. But even Titus, who was with me, was not compelled to be circumcised, though he was a Greek, but because of false believers, secretly brought in, who slipped in to spy on the freedom we have in Jesus Christ, that they might enslave us. We did not submit to them even for a moment, so that the truth of the gospel might always remain with you. And from those who were supposed to be acknowledged leaders, what they actually were makes no difference to me. God shows no partiality. Those leaders contributed nothing to me. On the contrary, when they saw that I had been entrusted with the gospel for the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been entrusted with the gospel for the circumcised, for he who worked through Peter, making him an apostle to the circumcised, also worked through me in sending me to the Gentiles. And when James and Cephas and John, who acknowledged pillars, recognized the grace that had been given to me, they gave to Barnabas and me the right hand of fellowship, agreeing that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. They asked only one thing, that we remember the poor, which was actually what I was eager to do. In this passage, we see two groups, and they have differences in opinion. On one hand, we have the church in Jerusalem, led by James, and focused on the Jews. In this passage, that's represented by the word the circumcised. On the other hand, we have the church led by Paul, focused on the Gentiles, the uncircumcised. If we look first at the church in Jerusalem, the pillars of this church were James, Peter, and John. James was the brother of Jesus and the leading elder in that church. And when I looked up James in the who's who in the Bible, this was a great resource for me. There's three James. There's James, the son of Alphaeus. There's James, the son of Zebedee. And this James is a different one, the brother of Jesus. And Peter, he was a leader amongst the disciples, one of the inner group of three. He wrote 1st and 2nd Peter. I found it interesting to read that Peter in the New Testament has 4 forms of his name. His given name in Hebrew, I think, was Simeon Bar Jonah. And you translate that into Greek, you get Simon, son of John. And he also had the Aramaic name, Cephas, which we saw both names used in this passage. You translate that into Greek and you get Petros. And both Cephas and Petros mean rock. And that gives us the famous passage in Matthew 16, verse 18, when Jesus says, "Now I say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it." And John the Apostle, known as the disciple whom Jesus loved, author of the fourth gospel, 3 epistles, an epistle is just a letter, and possibly the book of Revelation. This is an all-star lineup. We could say it's an Olympic lineup. They walked with Jesus. They ministered with Jesus. And now they're the focal point of the Christian church in Jerusalem with ministry to the Jewish people. This is a tough group to go and address. And if we look now at the church led by Paul, Paul is the apostle to the Gentiles and the author of 13 epistles. He wrote 13 letters, according to this. The second chapter of Galatians starts with, 14 years later, I went up again to Jerusalem. From the commentaries that I've read, the 14 years that he talks about is measured from the date of his conversion. In the previous Galatians 1, he said, after 3 years I went to Jerusalem. That was 3 years from the date of his conversion. So there's 11 years between these 2 trips, and Paul is measuring time based on the year of his revelation and conversion on the road to Damascus. It represents a new birth for him, a new life. Also working in Paul's ministry with the Gentiles are Titus and Barnabas, Timothy and Silas. These 2 groups, the one in Jerusalem and Paul's mission to the Gentiles, they have a difference in opinion. James, in the church from Jerusalem, holds tenaciously to the Jewish laws, the laws of Moses. Peter had opened the door to the Gentiles, but he leaned towards following the Jewish laws. He kind of represented the middle ground. And Paul, based on the miraculous and overwhelming suddenness of his conversion, had his early Jewish prejudices erased. And he now supports ministry to the Gentiles and supporting the church, the Christian church. And in that ministry, as it's stated later in verse 16, he says that, knowing that man is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. Paul welcomes Gentiles to the Christian church by faith in Jesus, without following the Jewish laws. Exact opposite of James. This doctrine would be ungrateful to many, yet Paul owned it. Titus had come with Paul on this trip. Titus was born of Gentile parents. If I read from a quote out of the Who's Who in the Bible. With the hotly contested issue of compulsory circumcision of Gentile converts to Christianity before the council, Paul decides to make a test case of Titus. The council decided ultimately in Paul's favor, and Titus was accepted by the apostles and the leaders in Jerusalem without being circumcised. In the face of strong opinion, strong differences in opinion, what can we learn about how these 2 groups behaved for how it might point to our road ahead? First, collectively, the apostles together represent Christ, the one head. This includes Paul, James, Peter, and John in the apostleship. Second, acknowledging the grace given to Paul, the leaders in Jerusalem extended to Paul and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship. The giving of the right hand is a gesture of friendship. Third, they agreed to work together, dividing their work to be done. Paul and Barnabas would go to the Gentiles, and the church in Jerusalem would preach to the Jews. Here we can appreciate that the gospel is not ours, but it is God's. We have been entrusted to be the keeper of it. Fourth, a mutual call to ministry with a focus on attending to the poor. In verse 10, repeating it, all they asked was that we should continue to remember the poor, the very thing I was eager to do. It is my opinion that these two groups valued and respected each other. They worked together and found a middle ground that both could follow. Now, the way the passage that we read seems a little one-sided because Titus didn't have to be circumcised. When I read about in the commentaries the council at Jerusalem, which occurred around 50 AD, the council decided that the Gentile converts to Christianity were not obligated to keep to the laws of Moses, including the one concerning circumcision of males. The council did, however, retain several other laws. They found a middle ground, and you'd have to read about that to find out where that middle ground was. It's too complicated to go in the few minutes that I have left. And of course, these two groups maintained the bond of fellowship. Now, I'd like to set that topic aside and look at our road ahead from the perspective of building on our strong ministry foundation. Recall that I said that we should discern through prayer what God would have us do to further our mission as a church, building on the foundation we have. Pastor Lara has already spoken to us at business meetings and in written communications about conducting a community survey. Such a survey would be based on the principles of ethnography. And I was given a book on ethnography. And I am on page 29. I am not very far in this book, but already in reading the introduction in chapter 1, there are things that I would like to share. 3 sentences. It offers a way for a congregation to transform its common life and its purposeful work in the world. Honest engagement requires that our view of a person, a community, and ourselves be enlarged in some way. This expanding awareness holds the potential for transforming a congregation and our shared faith practices. Putting these two things together, and in conclusion, the early Christian church, led by Paul and James, the church ministering to the Gentiles and to the Jews, they were divided in opinion on the laws of Moses. Yet they valued and respected each other. They found a middle ground. They maintained a bond of friendship. And they focused on ministry. And I ask that we do the same. I ask that we trust and obey God's calling. Again, from where I started my talk, I went to the ABC Regional Annual Gathering, and something else I took away from that gathering was a quote that said that a church should not wait to be unified before it embraces new ministry, but it is the act of embracing new ministry that unifies a church. This is my view of our road ahead. Amen.